Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. This is a special principal's coffee designed, and we decided to do it now with mathematics with Mrs. Pellegrino, because right about now, if you have a 7th grader especially, this is where we're moving from quarter 1 to quarter 2, and that's significant because we're going to be asking students in 7th grade to engage in, independently by their choice, rich tasks, extension problems, and we want to make sure that we talk to parents at a time when they can go then talk to their children, not to push them to do anything, but to kind of be with them along this journey so kids can find out where they best fit in the math curriculum and what is best for them. It's an ongoing conversation. We don't just send the kids out to sail with you guys and say, let us know what you decide at the end. It's a real partnership at the middle school. So thank you so much. Inevitably, this is always the best attended parent or principal's coffee that we have during the year. But come back in January, we're having another one. But I think that's about it. I'm going to introduce Lisa and let her take it and thank her very much. Her leadership in the mathematics department, whether you look at over the past 10, or how long have you been here? 14 years. You can just see how thoughtful our approach is, and research-based and grounded and collaborative in terms of how we move math forward for our students to ensure that when they graduate, they are really deep, well-thought mathematicians ready to take on whatever they want to take on in their lives and in their future post-high school career. So, Lisa, all yours?
All right, so great to see everyone, and I have some returning customers, which I love. You know, some people are maybe here from the mathematics. I'd like to think it's my sparkling personality, but either one I'll take. So this is me. I'm Lisa Pellegrino, the 612 math chairperson. As Kim said, I've been here for a while. I won't give you any numbers, but it's over 10. So this is our essential question at HCC. I'm not just going to read it for you, but if you leave with any feeling, the biggest feeling I would want you to leave with is that as a department, we are really just trying to make sure that your child is in the right place. So when a teacher makes a recommendation, regardless of where that is in their journey from 6-12, they're making it not because they're trying to push someone in or keep someone out. They're making it just because they really believe that that's the right place for that individual. And I hope that you feel that. If you ever don't feel that in your communications with a teacher, that's why I'm here, and we can work through that. But I've worked with this department, like I said, for a long time. They're extraordinarily strong, and I do believe that this is at their core what they're trying to do every day. Get students to take risks, risks that are within their zone of proximal development, and to really just have that healthy, balanced mindset. So here we are, we're going to talk about the math pathways. What you see in these pictures are examples of a rich task. A rich task means that it may or may not be directly related to the curriculum. So it could apply to a particular standard, like a particular next-gen standard, or it could require just some general mathematics thinking and problem solving. So what you see here are students working together. They'll spend anywhere from half to a full period on a particular task in the doing, but then that task comes back and kind of pays dividends throughout the year. So you really get a lot of rich mathematics that come from it. And the nice thing about rich tasks, which has grounded our work for probably the past 10 years, is you can enter it at any point. So a student can offer something here, 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 or here, which allows for equity in the math classroom. So this is kind of what everyone is, I think, really here to see, right? Which is our math pathways. So if you see the kind of 3 main math pathways that we offer, the first one in yellow is what you would consider your traditional mathematics high school pathway, starting with Math 6, Math 7, pre-algebra, algebra, geometry, algebra 2 trig, and pre-calculus. As of right now, the only regents that we offer is the Algebra 1 regents. So all Algebra 1 classes will take that, and after that, regardless of the level, we don't offer any other regents past that. The reason being because the regents doesn't really align well with our curriculum, and in the past it's had a fair number of errors within the test, and we just felt like our kind of homegrown curriculum and homegrown assessments were a little bit more tailored to the students that are here as opposed to kind of the general state. And then you also may have heard some recent news talking about New York State moving away from the regions as well. So that is something that the state as a whole is doing.
Is Algebra 1 all that's required for graduation?
Correct, yes, thank you. So Algebra 1 is the only required regents. For other areas of the state, that's a pretty big hurdle. It can often be the determiner of whether a student is going to graduate. I can tell you, we do pretty nicely on the Algebra 1 regents, both here and at the high school. So if you ever want to see some data that maybe will give you some comfort as to the success of the program, that's certainly one of them. Our kids do quite nicely on it. The second pathway is what we call our 3 and 2. So I'm going to tell you a couple of misnomers or misconceptions that people have or have heard about that particular pathway. So 3 and 2 is called that because essentially you're taking 3 years of classes, and I put that in air quotes for a reason, of mathematics and consolidating it into 2. But that consolidation is not just that we're taking every single topic and going through it quickly. I have another slide that's going to talk to you about how we make those decisions, but I don't want you to think prima facie that we're just kind of speeding through 3 years of curriculum in 2 years. That's not it. So in 10th grade, the students would take a course called Geometry, Trig, and Algebra 2, 11th grade Pre-Calculus, and 12th grade either AP Calculus AB or a non-AP Calculus. So that comes from what we would consider our main/second pathway for acceleration. The biggest misconception that people have about this pathway is that if their student is not in the blue pathway, they can't take AP Calculus, which is not true. I'll say it again because it is so often misunderstood. If a student is accelerated after 9th grade, they can still take AP Calculus in their senior year. The only distinction between the two pathways is that the blue pathway culminates in a class called AP Calculus BC. That course is 2 semesters of college calculus. AB is 1 semester of college calculus. That's really the only distinction. Did that answer your question, or?
No, I was just curious, when you're talking about the second pathway, you said that kids can take AP Calculus. Can I ask you how many of that students in the green end up taking the calculus?
I would say
what's the numbers now?
typically a 3-to-2 ratio, with the 3 being AP Calc AB and the 2 being the non-AP Calc.
But I just mean, how many students right now are in the calculus AB that took algebra in 9th grade?
That took algebra in 9th grade?
Yeah.
I would tell you it's probably roughly 3/4 of the students from the Algebra 1, with the remaining 1/4 being students that may have moved down from the blue pathway at some point earlier.
Thanks.
Yeah.
The BC stands for business calculus?
No, it actually doesn't stand for anything other than it's just their nomenclature. So they say AB is the first semester of calculus, and then BC is the first 2 semesters. But it doesn't have any significance to the letters, other than that's how college boards name it.
It is so good.
Most folks that are going into, for example, business or an engineering, with the exception of engineering at very specific schools like a Caltech or an MIT, that BC is not necessarily required. I know a lot of people have that misconception as well. I would tell you, again, if you were applying in engineering at MIT or Caltech, is that a deal breaker? It probably is. It probably is. But
So,
I have had
halfway-
students in AB that have gone on to study engineering at very rigorous institutions.
So pathway 1 is more advanced than pathway 2?
So yes, so pathway 1, which is the blue pathway, is the one that starts in 8th grade here. The A pathway in general, the best way I could describe it to you is that pathway is like a broken clock that changes time, not every 60 seconds or every 60 minutes, but every 45 seconds or every 45 minutes, depending on the particular course. So the green pathway is 3 years of content that is cherry-picked into 2 years. The blue pathway is not the same. That will move and move quickly. It moves quickly and it moves deeply. So that particular pathway, which is, as Ms. Lappel talked about, having students have that independence and seeking out those extensions, that's why that is such an important piece, because for our blue pathway, you're going to be, having a lot of the onus of that responsibility on you as
Lisa, did you talk, I had to step out just to get a couple
Sorry,
minutes. Just 1 second, did you talk about why this happened?
Not yet.
Okay, you're going to?
Yes.
Okay, because great.
Yes.
I'm sorry, this is all new to me.
For sure.
So in 8th grade, all our students take the same math.
7th grade.
7th grade.
Yes.
And then are they directed by the administration, by the teachers? Is it recommended? Are they put on the path?
So,
I'm trying to
so
understand,
part of the process
or
is that we
do we
want
advocate for
students to, in 7th grade, they're going to be exposed to many different opportunities in math to either challenge themselves, stay on level, or maybe get additional support, because we have all different types of math learners, correct? Right. So in 7th grade, right after, so they've been exposed to like enrichment activities or extensions already, but now, after first quarter, where they've been kind of handheld in terms of these are extensions, this is what you should do, here's what you could try, and the teacher's been working with them. Now, after quarter 1, it's if you feel like you want this challenge, take these extension activities, and they're in different, they'll show up in different ways. After assignments on tests, they might be an additional problem that the kids are asked to do, and some kids say, I don't want it. Some kids say, I totally want it. Some parents say, you should do it, which is great, but here's the thing, some parents say you should do it, and the kids start to really stress, and that's where we have to take our cues. There's this, so the blue pathway, which then Algebra 1A is in 8th grade, it is fast-paced, highly driven. I love math, and I want to engage and spend lots of time, if necessary, doing math, and I might not be the top of my class in 8th grade. So there's a whole lot of things you have to consider, right? Is your child mature enough to handle all this hard work and not be top of the class or not? Not to do well or not do well? Or it's, a lot of this is clear, and there's always those cuspy gray area students that we don't know always the correct placement. That's where we use all of this work in 7th grade, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th quarter, where we look at whether students did this independently or not. If they didn't do it independently, did they need a push but they really could do it, or were they in over their head and they realized it and it didn't make them comfort? So there's safe discomfort, and then there's uncomfortability, and that's all what we're trying to weed out in the class. So Mrs. Pasquale, Mrs. Pace, Mr. Brogan, they're working with kids. They're writing notes down sometimes about how they're doing on some of these activities. They're really, really present with the students. The piece that I hear the most of is parents say, I didn't know. As a parent, I want to know, man. I want my child to be exactly where they should be. Then the question is, why didn't you know? It's okay. Is your child an independent learner and knows what they need? Is your child need that push? If they're not ready and you're pushing them, it worries us sometimes, because in 8th grade, we want everyone to be in Algebra 1A who should be in 1A, and if they should be pushed and it's appropriate, that's great. Math 7 is where we start to try to figure that out. And then at the end of the year, you'll get information. You can always check in. You can see it on the portal. You can do it. And then at that point, we let that, like, it's almost like there's, yes, they're being put in different classes, but it's based on all this work that we've done. Not like this, but like this.
What happens if your kid goes into the accelerated path and then they're really struggling? When do they get out?
So 2 things, and Elisa, you can bet. First of all, we have an idea about that, and that's where we have I'd say 5 years of data now.
Yep.
We usually can tell if there's going to be if your child might have some challenges, and we'd have conversations. And there's summer work that your child could engage in if they're that cuspy, and we think they could do it. We never want to shut them out and not allow them, but we'll probably say, hey, here's what we're seeing. You could do the summer work if this really seems like we're not sure. Sometimes we're like, they've done 2 of the 28 extensions, or they scored 2 out of 28. Their average is really high on the quizzes, but that's without the extensions. Like, we'll be able to provide you with some detail. If they go in, there's a first quarter in 8th grade that allows some movement. So if they're not in, and we say, okay, they're cuspy, but we're really worried, and you say, you know what, let's wait and see how they do, and let's have them earn their way in. And when I say earn, it isn't like they're raising their hand extra. It's that they've shown those skills of advocating, of making conceptual understandings that are necessary to be independent learners. Then we would move them in 8th grade. And what we always don't want to do is put them in and then say, we're moving you out. It's okay, but I just find that much more challenging and difficult for a student. And I'll hear parents say to me, I know that they can do it. So the worry is, we know, because we believe so much in our child, but we don't want to put them in a place where we were wrong. And a lot of parents, when I hear the argument is, I'd rather them know that we believe in them and put them in. There's something to why we say, let's have them start in pre-algebra and move them in 8th grade after a month, because we'll tell them what they have to do. If they do it, they're in, and they've earned it, versus we don't want to move kids out. It's harder. Did that make sense?
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, say they do fine in 8th grade and then they get into 9th grade and now it's like, oh, this is terrible. Where do they go? Like,
the first 3 weeks of school, they can drop the class.
No, but I'm saying like 6 months in. This isn't working.
Like, you're not going to repeat.
This is, do they repeat and then it's, I don't.
So it depends on the timing.
Okay.
So if we really have a concern about someone going into 9th grade, then we might have that conversation with the family over the summer and just say, here are the options. One option is to kind of repeat Algebra 1 in the high school, and you get kind of a clean break there, so the first course is not listed on the transcript, and then you kind of have a fresh
So you go back
start
down to like path
with
1.
that, right?
Okay.
With the idea that you would go into pathway 2. I'm going to grab you. I just want to make sure I'm answering this question first.
But you are repeating it again.
So
You are repeating it. Yes. Okay.
if you are in the advanced geometry class, it is, I'll say, it's not ideal to move down, because the only place to move down during that class is to Geometry 10. So I think one of the reasons that, and as Kim kind of pointed out, we're very cautious and thoughtful about making sure that that blue pathway is the right pathway, is a lot of folks have this misconception that, well, even if they're in a higher level class, if they're not doing well, they've still been exposed to that higher level math, so like net, it would be okay. Unfortunately, the research doesn't support that, and I can tell you just the data that we have at Byram Hills doesn't support it. Because what happens is, because there's too much of a gap of that class and where the student is at that moment, they're not able to access the mathematics appropriately. The students that I can tell you with 100% certainty, the students that move down into this class are outperformed by the students that went through algebra in 9th grade.
And the background of this, can you give the
100%.
background? Because I'm chomping at it. It's like, there's...
Sure. So I know a lot of folks have friends in neighboring districts that might have an Algebra 1 for everyone in 8th grade. We, in the past, had a program where the students were accelerated. It was actually very early. It was at the end of 6th grade, was the original kind of bifurcation. And that was the only time you could get off or on the train. And Tim and I had done some research for a long period of time and some longitudinal studies, and what came from that was, by the time students had gotten to high school, 20% of that cohort, on average, that was accelerated, earned C's, D's, and F's.
And what that did in high school then is crushing for kids, right? So I was a math chair before Lisa got here. I faked my way through. I was a social studies chair who got to be involved with the math department. And I had to kind of talk with the families about the fact that when they were almost usually okay in geometry, and then they hit algebra 2 trig, and the bottom fell out because they rushed through algebra so quickly. Maybe they were tutored, and I don't care about tutoring. My son will get tutored if they need to, but what it did was it pushed too hard too fast, and it had little cracks. It didn't show up, not in geometry, but then in the algebra 2 trig, and that was crushing for our kids because then they're in high school, then it's on the transcript. There's just much more complexity than. So what Lisa and Tim did was they took it slower, and we made sure that algebra was extremely strong. So then later they had all the tools necessary to really have that depth of thinking and mathematical mindset to be successful later on in the 3 to 2.
And I can tell you, if I took my chairperson hat off and I put my parent hat on, and I have conversations with parents both, colleges are going to look at 2 things. They're going to look at your grades, or your child's grades, and they're going to look at where they ended mathematically. And that is how they will determine the success of your child. That is it. So that is why and you know, I can tell you it is heartbreaking. I teach BC calculus, and it is heartbreaking every year when one of your students that you know has really put their all in for 4 or 5 years, and they're not getting into certain colleges. And there's a misconception that, you know, that's the class you need in order to get into these colleges. And like I said, I can tell you it is not. I've had students in AB, I've had students in non-AP calculus get into schools that students in my BC class do not. And so I say that, and anyone that knows me knows, like, I'm very candid, and I will let you know kind of the reality of the entire situation, because I want you as a family to be able to make an informed decision. So if a college is looking at 2 students and one moved down and had C's, and maybe even now they have A's, right? But they had those C's on their transcript and they're going to end in AP Calc AB, whereas the other one had A's the whole way through, the second student will be viewed as stronger. Right. And again, that doesn't mean that you never do the blue pathway or never do the green. It's just things as a family that you want to take into consideration as you're thinking about these decision points.
Are the students aware of these pathways? Are they?
Oh yes, we talk to them about it quite a bit.
Are you talking in middle school or in high school?
Like
Yeah,
our
they are,
seventh
but
graders, like, do they?
They know that there is the Algebra 1A. They know about it. I don't really know if we want to, like, and I think they
The
know
7th grade teachers do meet with the students mid-year to kind of check in with them
I
and
think it
let
was
them
last
know.
week, because my daughter's talked about it.
I think we're trying to also balance.
Yeah, you don't want to stress
But yes,
them out. Yeah.
but there is, and then we have conversations with you. And I think what Lisa said is, we're not telling you not to do the blue. I think it is to trust the process up to a point. You should advocate for your child.
Sure.
You should. I mean, it's never perfect. Parent input is critical. Just know that we want the correct placement, because also in 8th grade, this is a high school course. And if this is going to be on their transcript, they might not realize it, which is kind of nice because they don't feel that pressure, but you realize it, which is also impactful for their college transcript.
Obviously, in respect to the teachers who have so much on their plate, at what point, so we're not bothering a teacher, will the teacher really be getting closer to the sense of the path they're going to be suggesting for that student as we get closer? You know,
I think
I'm
it's a
just
journey.
curious.
Ask your child what they're doing and what extension. That's like, to me, that's an ongoing conversation. And then take their cues. Again, you know your child, you know what they need, you know what they're ready for. There's some students that have unbelievable mathematical ability or strong, and then have a good work ethic and can do independent work. No worries. Then there's those, again, it always comes down to, it's not hard if it's the black and white part, but it's the gray, which are so many students that we want to make sure it's the right placement. You will start to hear, you could check in with teachers And then what will happen is you can kind of tell by the extensions. If they're not doing well on their extensions, if they're not doing the extensions or they're not doing well, talk to your child and then check in and ask Ms. Pasquale or Mrs. Pace or Mr. Brogan. Then at the end of the year, it's not the end all. That's the one thing that we've worked hard at. If it's really clear to us, we'll give you that feedback and you can push and we'll say, here, they can try the summer activities with no guarantees. That will give you an idea. Any students that we're not sure of, then at the end of the summer, they meet with Lisa with the work that they've done, and then that also becomes clear. So we're always trying to get more data to give us information. And then, if it's still not clear, we still have that month in September, part of October, where those math curriculums are running parallel. But in that, it isn't for the teacher to say, hey, you should be doing the extensions. If that child wants in, it's not like we're making them jump through a hoop for the hoop. It's because if they don't want it, if they don't like it, it will be absolute torture if they go into the Algebra 1A class. So there's all these things that we're doing, not to be, because it's the best path.
Can I ask a follow-up question to what you just said? Ask your child, you said like, look to see if they're doing the extensions, how they're doing on the extensions. How do we do that?
Yeah, that's.
It's on the portal.
Yeah.
Oh, but you can see the extensions specifically.
So you'll see the grades for the
Yeah.
extensions. So,
Oh.
so the extensions are sometimes at the end of each test. So
Right.
listen to your child in what they say.
Yep.
If they say they didn't have time to finish, well then maybe that's a skill, that the skills that they need to work on for their math, that's why they didn't get to it.
Right.
Or they had trouble, that's because you can't apply it. So help them in those sorts of areas as to where they're.
I didn't realize that we can see the extensions
that?
on the portal.
On the portal.
So-
Under what? Yeah.
So
So-
sometimes it might be a standalone and sometimes it might be a comment.
Right in
on
the
a
grades.
particular grade
Right in
that
the
you
grades.
hover over and it would show up.
No, just 7.
So this is 7th grade,
Yep.
moving in the second marking period.
Right.
So these
It wouldn't be
extensions
there
now
for
start
first.
in the
Got
second.
it. Okay.
Yes. And whether they do it or not becomes more of a choice. By the way,
There have
your math teacher will not,
There have been.
like, so if they see a child with tremendous potential who's not doing it, they're not gonna be like, not my job. It will be that they encourage them. But they're only gonna encourage up to a point, because then they also take the cue that that child might not be ready
For sure.
for whatever reason, right? I also wanna point out that in math, if your child continues in pre-algebra on level for 8th grade, there are still extensions and challenges. So I would want to know that if I felt like maybe I'm going to let my child figure it out, but why would I not be anxious if they weren't in the top class? Because I want my child to be a competitor
So
and
to
be
that
involved.
point, maybe I'll just go through, if we can hold off for a
Great.
second, just because I want to mention those other 2
Great.
things, and then we'll come back to the questions.
Okay.
So
We took hold of this presentation and kind of went way off.
Good discussion.
Yeah, it's great.
well, I didn't need those.
This is the most people
There
we've
we go.
seen since COVID, so.
Yeah, what in January?
Yeah, if I could just, Lisa, make one more point to emphasize as you go into this information. Hi, I'm Dr. Kaltenecker. I know many of you, but it's good to see so many faces. Lisa and I have done a lot of research on this, and our goal was always that, and from our research was that a strong foundation in math is essential to success later on. And that's our whole purpose, is making sure students have the prerequisite knowledge and skills and a really strong foundation, so that as they go through the system, they can continue to take more challenging mathematics. But once they have a weak foundation, we found through our study that it starts to collapse and it gets harder to catch up once they get older. Not impossible, but harder. So our whole goal is strong foundation, do well early on, and you end up accelerating faster.
That is it's a good point, right? And it's one of the inherent difficulties of mathematics that is different than other disciplines, right? So if you're an English 9 and you didn't love a particular book or struggled with it, that book's not going to show up again in English 10. You know, if you didn't have a love of European history, but then by 11th grade, you really are into it and you love American history, again, that block from
You
European
can
is not
compensate
going
it
to,
much better than with math.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess depends on your point of view, mathematics is quite foundational. And I can tell you, I say to my BC Calc class often, everything you need to know for calculus is just everything you've ever learned in math. And that's not my saying, it's just it's like kind of a well-known calculus saying, because it will start to pull from every single facet of mathematics in a particular problem. which is, to me, one of the beautiful things about calculus, but can also be, frustrating as well. So our second pathway, as I said, we call
is
it,
after ninth grade.
which is after 9th grade. As I said, we call it a 3 and 2, but I don't want you to walk out of here thinking that it's just 3 years that we speed through. So within any curriculum, it is informed both by state standards, standardized testing, and also just topics that we feel as math teachers are interesting and beneficial for our students. Some of that required a little bit of negotiation when it came down to the 3 and 2, right? Because I might have some favorite math topics that are not necessarily requisite for the study of calculus or for SATs or ACTs, and those were topics as a teacher I might have had to say, okay, I'm going to be okay with not including those in the 3 and 2, because we're really going to leave that focused towards success over the next couple of years. And again, that success is not just in calculus, but it is success in science. So we work very closely with the science department. We have numerous conversations, both large group and informal, throughout the year, just aligning on expectations for mathematics, what students are going to come in knowing, how does that inform where they're going to go from a science standpoint, whether that's in Chem A in 10th grade or physics in 12th grade, wherever that is. The next piece is the SAT and ACT. We actually did a fairly extensive review this past summer because of the new SATs that have come out. So if anybody has children in high school, the SATs will now be or have changed into a different format where the test itself kind of has 2 pathways it can take depending on how students answer particular questions. And we have the benefit of teachers that also do kind of a lot of outside work within SAT and ACT tutoring, and so they have a good pulse on kind of trends in the test. So with any standardized test, I can say the same thing for the Regents, for my AP Calc. We have spreadsheets and spreadsheets of what test questions have been asked and when and where tests are trending. And the same is true with the SAT. So you start to see different trends occurring within that test. And so we did a fairly extensive review, like I said, this summer to make sure that we were meeting where we saw that test going. And again, that's for all of our levels, including the 3 and 2. So we did make some adjustments as well, as we do every summer for our curriculum work, to align with where those tests are going. One, again, because of that new format of the SATs, and also 2, again, if you have any students that are juniors or seniors, you're seeing a little bit of a reversal now in the test optional. So for 4 or 5 years, we saw test optional, test optional, test optional when applying to colleges, but colleges are starting to turn the other way and requiring the SAT or ACT score. So we always want to make sure that we're putting the students in the best position possible. And as a result, I do think our test results as a district are quite nice as well. So you can take some comfort in that. So that is really what informs that pathway, so that by the time students exit that pathway in junior year into that either calculus or AP calculus, they have the foundation necessary for that. And like I said, I think someone had asked earlier, it's usually like a 3-to-2 ratio in terms of students electing to go into AP Calc AB versus a non-AP Calc. And I would tell you in general, a lot of these decisions in terms of movement are not just teacher directed, they really come as a conversation between the teacher and the family. As students get into high school, there's more and more that is added to their plate in terms of requirements, in terms of rigor. In 10th grade, you start to see an AP offering. In the social studies, you see what is typically known as a quite difficult science offering in our Chem A, and then that only goes up from their junior and senior year. You also have students starting to study in science research. So there's just different things that pull at a student's time that might also inform where they choose to go the following year.
So the AP Calc is first semester senior year?
It is, so it's the whole year, but it is equivalent to a semester-long college-level class.
So they take the AP exam at the end of senior year?
Correct. So it's, so like any AP exam, for example, with the exception of a physics or the BC. So for example, if you take an AP Euro, an AP World, you're studying that for the year in high school. When you take the exam, if you get credit for it, it's the equivalent of 1 semester of college credit.
But it's not being factored into their applications because they're already sent by that.
Either way, that score doesn't get factored in, right? That's usually just something that the students get, like those scores, like the colleges are pretty much gonna base it.
End of junior year.
Correct, off of your end of
But
junior
they can
and
still
what
get
you're
credit.
taking senior year. Oh, absolutely.
If they do well.
Absolutely can still get credit.
College credit.
A lot of colleges now will have you, they might offer credit and also still have you take a placement exam. We've seen that as a trend that colleges are going. So it depends on the particular college, how they decide to do that. So they might place you out of a class, they might give you 3 credits of elective, but then have you take a placement test, all depends on the particular college.
And so then the BC is equivalent to 2 semesters, but also taught 1 year and
Correct.
also ends in the AP.
Well, so it is on paper taught 1 year, I'll say it that way. A lot of, like I said, the A pathway is like a broken clock, right? So content is always moving down. So that Algebra 1A class has more advanced content pulled down into it. The advanced geometry has more advanced content pulled down into it. So the advanced Algebra 2 trig class, for example, has probably, you know, maybe between 1/3 and 1/2 of what would be traditional pre-calculus content put into that class. That advanced pre-calc/calculus course, and the reason it's named that is because half of the class is what would be considered pre-calculus topics and the other half is calculus. Some of those calculus topics are what would traditionally be a first semester, some of them are second. So some of those are true BC topics that are pulled down into 11th grade. Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up? This is sort of building on what you said. So how much recalibration happens at the high school level between the different paths? Or at that point, are they kind of in and like?
So if you were going to move, I think the most mathematically, the best point for you to move if you could kind of sustain it is after Algebra 2 Trig A, like the advanced Algebra 2 trig. And the reason I say that is because the following 2 years, it's really a 2-year commitment. I would not recommend going into advanced pre-calc/calculus if you're not going to take BC Calc, because half of that course is calculus. So to go into it and move down after would be incongruous, because then you would just be repeating a lot of that material senior year. So that's your most natural break point. Now for some students, they say, I'm overwhelmed, I'm swamped, you know, I have other things going on, whatever it is, and they'll move earlier. That might be, like I said, if it's during 9th grade and a student really needs to move, the only option for them at that point is that Geometry 10 class. I would tell you as a parent, I think it's not ideal. That's why, like I said, we want to really be, you know, cautiously optimistic, I'd say, with our replacement.
Just for like a complete perspective, like, and you may not know these numbers.
Yeah.
Like, how many students take 8th grade algebra, and how many students are in the current BC Calc class?
That's good. So basically, how many drop?
Like, how many start on like the most
good
rigorous
question.
path, and how many end?
Usually
it's
around
typically-
20%.
Yeah, I think our Algebra 1A numbers tend to range between 40 and 50. Right, because you usually have 2 sections.
Right.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
I was talking percentages, yep, okay.
Sorry, I was giving it like an absolute number.
About, yeah, Angela, right?
My BC has 13.
13. So it's in, you know, the 40 is like probably 30% of the class or 25% of the class.
Finish, start.
And then you're
Correct.
ending with like 10% of the class.
And some of that's also that,
Right?
Now,
So that's
this
just
current year's juniors have 20, so that's a larger percent, like, so there's fluctuation in it.
and some of the attrition you see is because kids just could do it, but they decide it's not
Right.
their
That's
interest,
honestly the
right? So
vast
there's all
majority of
different
attrition.
reasons why they don't continue on. But that's why there's such care done at this level to make sure everyone understands the commitment of Algebra 1A.
Right.
And where we see through data your child.
I think, so one of the things I just want to highlight on that point, so it is difficult, I'll come back to this in a second. It is difficult when, and I know this as a parent, when there's not a lot of up here offerings, right? So the one or two that are there, whether it's earth science in 8th grade or algebra 1A in 8th grade, seem like you've got to get on that bus, right? You have this overwhelming like sense of obligation as a parent to make sure that your child is there, because you feel like if they're not, maybe you've done a disservice to them. Or at least I'll tell you, that's how, you know, as now having a parent of a middle schooler, like I definitely feel that. So what we've tried to do now, this is new for this year, so you guys are getting kind of the
In 8th grade.
first glimpse of this for 8th grade, is to offer another kind of form of recognition for those students that are performing in 8th grade and doing those extensions and succeeding, and to provide that information to the 9th grade teachers.
These are kids who didn't move up after
Yes.
summer.
Correct.
So we have, feedback is so important. So we receive feedback that, oh, my child's not motivated then to do those extensions, because why should they? And I, you know, you want to be like, because you love math and you want to really work hard. So what we tried to do then is, with the suggestion of the 8th grade teachers, was, can we at least recognize students who do these harder assignments in the pre-algebra, on the on-level, so that we can say at the end, great job, you know, you did the harder work, you took care of like, you did it. So that's where, we've always done these activities, we've always had mild, medium, and spicy options, but now we're trying to recognize the students who take risks and push themselves, and we give and what will this look like? I think we've talked about recognize them in, there'll be a handout at 8th grade moving up where we recognize those students who did those things.
Yes.
Okay. I had a question. I guess what I'm hearing is that, unlike maybe other districts like Chappaqua, Scarsdale, Syosset, we don't provide Algebra 1 to the majority of students because of the studies you found later. But I guess what I'm concerned about is I've been hearing that 9th grade is not standard algebra at Byram. It's a more advanced algebra. So I guess what I'm trying to understand is, why don't we just provide just a standard Regents algebra in 8th, but instead we're delaying it and making it harder for them in 9th? Like, that's where I'm just, like, to be honest, I would have thought Chappaqua, Scarsdale, Syosset had done similar studies, and they're like, we just do a standard algebra class, Regents, and the students do very well in 8th grade. You know, so that's where I'm just like kind of
I definitely hear that is a buzz that's out there. I might have a different interpretation of students doing well than what Chappaqua has.
Well, Scarsdale,
or Scarsdale, right? And Scarsdale, like, look, I grew up in Jericho, so if you really want to go to bat, come down there. That's a different world.
I heard the 9th grade from here, what we're being told is our 9th grade algebra is not standard algebra.
Is it more rigorous? It absolutely is.
So that's
Do I think colleges know that? Absolutely they do. 100% they do.
No, I'm not even worried about what colleges think. I'm just like, why aren't we providing just a standard algebra anywhere? It sounds like you don't have that in 8th and you don't have that in 9th.
Well, we do have, I mean, there is another algebra in 9th grade called Regents Algebra if there are students that would need that additional support. I think our reasoning, so in the 9th grade, you will see, I'll say this, I'll put our 9th grade algebra against anyone in the state, including Jericho.
No, it's just more just
but in this context, that class is incredibly differentiated. You could walk into that class on any given day, and there might be 6 different things at different readiness levels for students to do. It is an extraordinarily well-tailored class to ensuring student success. And we have worked on that over the past couple of years, very specifically the past 2 years. And the results we have seen are those students have done amazingly quarter to quarter. Their retention of material is astounding. Their performance on the Regents is obviously good. But as a district, could I tell you that the Regents Regents level algebra, do I think that that is appropriate for the majority of students in our district? My honest answer to you is I don't.
For 8th grade, you don't think that?
8th or 9th. It is that algebra course, the intention of it at that level, right, is that is a lowest common denominator for the state. Our students are capable of so much more, so much more. And if you look at a lot of those programs or how the Common Core was structured, or even the Next Gen, those curriculums are structured to culminate in statistics. So you might not need the level of technicality from an algebra for culminating in statistics. But our students, by and large, are going to places that are expecting a pre-calculus or a calculus, and they're capable of it. And I think what we see as a result from the students in our class demonstrates that they can do it. Like I've not seen, and you know, anyone here could speak, I've never once seen a need to go backwards. Like I think we've been doing and focusing on having our students access the highest level of math that they can.
I think it's also speaking to the fact that algebra is a foundation,
Right.
and algebraic thinking is a foundation to calculus or higher level mathematics.
Right.
So we want a really strong algebra curriculum as well. And since we're building that strong foundation in the lower and middle school, then kids are ready for a strong algebra course. So we're pretty proud of our algebra curriculum. I think it's a really strong curriculum. Not that I like to cite rankings and such, but the last 2 years, we have been ranked #1 on the algebra regents in the region. So we do have really great scores. And I think
Better than Chappaqua Scarsdale.
Dumb it down.
I know those folks.
Just trying to understand,
Yeah.
you know, it's a and
So-
I get it. So you can criticize Chappaqua and Scarsdale, and they're not perfect, but it's just trying to understand. Like, I would think their math chair also thought a lot about this, so I was just trying to understand
Right.
why
Agreed.
we don't do a standard Asian class.
They're also double the size, so they have to have a broad
Great point,
offering. We're much smaller, so we can cater a Regents level class to
Right.
a much smaller group of students that actually need that level, rather than pulling down the entire.
I think with standard level as well, I mean, I might disagree a little in the language with Lisa, but I would say it is a standard algebra, and also that we're not let's say students' grades aren't going to be harmed because we're offering a harder course. If students master the basic algebra content, their grade will reflect that. Yeah, we're not making it hard so that grades.
Algebra 1.
Right.
And so it's a much more rigorous class.
I've had that,
And then
yeah.
the students are doing algebra 1 in age, and they're all rocking it. I mean, it's not rocket science algebra 1, it's not a calculus.
Right.
That was you hit it on the head.
Yeah, that was a debate we've had for
Yeah.
years in the math
Okay.
department, that we are above the typical standard, but that doesn't mean grades should be lower if kids don't achieve it. They still, if they master the basic algebra content, their grade should reflect that.
And looking again at the data, we've done that analysis over the past 3 years, and we have seen an increase in the number of A+, A, B, and a significant decrease in the number of Ds and Fs at the Algebra 1 level as well.
This is so great, this information, and I have another question. Because clearly, the more rigorous path is very specialized. Right. And it's for people who really, I get it, you know, are a certain type of student with diligence and love for math and wanting to do that. So if you have a child who goes the path that most of the children go to, because it's the best path for them, but come 10th grade, they're really exceptional in math, but they just didn't want that stress of the other path. Is there an opportunity for them? Can they take an AP? Can they move up at some point if they want to take that on once they're more confident in their abilities.
I've had students that have really decided, usually I would tell you the summer of junior year is typically if someone is going to make that decision, whether it's
So the opportunity is there.
Yes.
That's all I really want
I've
to
had
understand.
students that have done summer work to go into
Okay.
the BC.
Yeah.
You'd have to,
Oh, of
really
course.
have that for sure.
It's an
But
anomaly,
I've had
but I
students
was
do it
curious.
and perform nicely senior year.
Okay.
When Lisa and I were reconceptualizing the pathways going back 10 years ago, we both had the saying, more math for more students. We want students to take as much math. We're both mathematicians, we both study math, we love it. We want more of our students to take more math because we think it's great. So we wanted that opportunity to be available, and that's always our goal.
Yeah, no,
If we ever
thank
feel
you.
there's something in our system that's holding it back,
Absolutely.
we want to make a change. You've been trying for so long to get
I actually had a question back when the original pathway was on. And just by way of background, I actually do college admissions coaching and have with several students in this district. And you mentioned something twice that I view as a hole here. And while I have you all rounded up, I wanted to ask. So I have students every year that are in Algebra 1A, so the blue path.
Okay.
Ninth grade, advanced geometry. And that is where they hit their breaking point. And
Yes.
you've mentioned that there's really no great. So why is that? If that's the year where so many students in our district are feeling
Yes.
like that squeeze.
So I've been here for, I'll say 15, I think is my years here. And every single year I've been here, regardless of who teaches that class, and it's been 4 or 5 different folks at this point, that is for sure the hardest adjustment. I'm not going to say it's the hardest class, because students will often tell you that the advanced pre-calc class, from a rigor standpoint, but it's for sure the hardest adjustment. One of the reasons is students are adjusting to high school. That's a big difference between middle school and high school in terms of timing for tests, in terms of weight of other classes on their shoulders. Geometry is also a very abstract course. Algebra is a little bit more, I never want to paint math as formulaic, but there are some classes or some areas within math that are more so than others. Right? So in algebra, we would say it's a skills class. Similar to Algebra 2 Trig, that's a skills class. Geometry is not as straightforward in terms of okay, I have this and then I do this, and I've solved it and I've gotten an answer. Geometry is really based in proof work, right? So you're given a couple of things and you have to say, based off these things, what inferences can I make? What conclusions can I draw? And use that to go from A to B to C to D and then finally to E. Now that said, I will tell you that doesn't, as a chair, absolve me of looking at the class every single year and saying, how can we best help students succeed in this class? So we make adjustments to that every single year. We made an adjustment this particular year that I think so far, knock on wood, we've seen more success with the students emotionally and also skills-wise in this first quarter in terms of how we approach the summer work and trying to build in support. So we provide a good amount of time now at the start of that advanced geometry rather than putting it into the summer to try to build it into the class, try to support the students there, and also providing a little bit more structured time in class so that students kind of have a better idea of what the expectations are for them.
Right,
So,
but for the student that does decide to drop down,
yes.
and I know that there are several every year, they then go into Geometry 10.
Correct.
And then, is there a pathway
Then they go into the green pathway sophomore year.
automatically, or do they have to?
I would say I never want to say it's completely automatic. I mean, we would look at, but generally speaking, yes.
Okay.
That's where they would go.
Yeah, it's also, Lisa touched on a bit of that, and not to put blame on the shoulders of our students, but that does tend to be the most anxious group of students. You know, these accelerated students in math at that grade. And we've made some adjustments. I remember when I was math chair, we tried to put an easy unit up front to make it an easier like transition for students. They're entering high school, they're anxious to begin with. And then they come in like with really hard content that's abstract and different. So we're trying to make adjustments, but it is a data point we're monitoring to try to get more success.
I would also say maybe.
But thanks for that insight. That's
Yeah, be a little bit more vocal about, for those students in advanced geometry that are considering dropping, to say that you can then hook back into the green path.
Okay.
Because I don't think
Thank you
that's
for that.
really.
That's good information.
That's great to
I
know.
don't
Thank
think
you.
that's.
Some of this is marketing to students
Yeah,
as well, just giving
absolutely.
them, knowing the options, and
Right.
we're here to help them choose the best pathway
Right.
for their education.
Here, and then we'll go linear back here.
So, we're in such an exciting moment in our history. You know, math is so forever the same, but we're in such an exciting moment with bioengineering and how the science connects so differently today with mathematics. It's kind of exciting, and I know you guys are all on top of that. It's so exciting. But if you have a child who is neurodiverse and already copes with anxiety, but clearly you have this suspicion, they are obsessed over everything engineering. They have everything, they know everything about all these crazy topics that you're like, wow. And it's so much earlier than we've ever seen because of the access of knowledge that they can acquire on their own outside of school. But you are very nervous to push them because, as you said, it's mental. Like you want to nurture that love of what they love.
Yes.
But if they don't go down a certain path and you don't tell them like, this is the way, or you're not even going to be considered to the schools that you would just thrive in because of all that cool stuff that they're doing there.
Yeah.
How do you manage that?
I mean, I can tell you I have as he will tell you, with any person he meets, neurodivergent child, and likes to mention that often. And I think what I've learned, even just working with him, there's never one answer to it. I wish there was. I really do. As a parent, I think it depends so greatly on that particular child. But I do also realize that, and I would never hold it against anyone as a parent with a child like that. Sometimes as a parent you do need to advocate more for that kid, and that's fine. I say if my son can get on the bus, wearing pants and with his Chromebook, like that's a success, right? I mean, it's a success.
I also think that part of that is that the schools are aware of your kids, and then we're going to do the work of talking and having conversations and figuring out the right fit as well. So it's this fine balance of what do we offer, how do we support, what are the opportunities, right?
And we're happy to and when I say advocate, I don't mean that as we're not going to do anything, but you should not ever feel bad about mentioning that or bringing that up or asking for help, because that's what we're here for.
And that's also true for the blue pathway. If you think a child belongs in the blue pathway, ask questions and advocate. Just know that the answers you're getting are what we feel are the best, not for your child. We're here with you, with your child. There's no reason for anything else but what's best for them.
And sometimes we know about all those other things, right? Because if you talk to my son, he'll just make sure you know about them.
So I just want to watch time. Right? Do we have a few more questions, right?
We're going to go here and then here. Yep.
This just gets back to kind of the geometry kind of roadblocking. I mean, they're in 7th grade and they're doing a lot of algebra. They started algebra at the end of last year.
Yes.
Next year they're doing all algebra. And then some of the kids, whether it's 9th or 10th grade, are going to hit geometry.
Yes.
So where you talked about for the accelerated pulling stuff back, can you just, from a curriculum standpoint, do we do anything to kind of ease them in, or
oh my gosh, we infuse algebra into geometry at every possible moment.
So that is part of.
Absolutely, it is very thoughtfully, yes. Because if not, what you end up having is this huge chasm between you've gone from algebra, now you're off in this world.
It's much more integrated than it used to be. I know when I took geometry, there was no algebra in it back in the day, talking in the early 80s. But it's much more integrated now with geometry and algebra and geometry.
Right.
So they are getting
you're
that kind of
getting
in
that
eighth grade before they get
Yes,
into
yeah, there's some
You were really
standards
right,
related to it.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanna make sure I understand the sequencing in
Yes.
ninth. So if they're dropping from advanced geometry into 10th grade geometry
Correct.
in ninth,
Yes.
they then, and they do well, they take geometry, trig, algebra
Two, yeah.
in 10th.
In 10th, correct.
They go to the green.
Correct.
Thank you.
That answers it. So.
No, I just had a question, just so for 7th grade, when they're, trying to determine, okay, they're gonna be in pre-algebra or algebra 1A, do you have kind of a number in mind, like we only want, like we're only gonna have 2 classes for, algebra 1A? Because I know in Wampus, when they did those enrichment, they're like, we're gonna need the top 2.
Fair question.
But
Angela
there's
is all
more
things
kids,
schedule, so all
We don't have a number in mind.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
So
will
we don't
somebody
have
who's
a
on the
number in
class
mind.
rep
We
do
currently
it?
have 2 classes
Mhm.
in each, one class on each team to allow for that, to allow as many kids as.
If we had a cohort that came through that was quite large.
Right, that's what I'm
we
wondering,
would-
like-
So we would never not do what's necessary because of a scheduling component. We would figure out a way, we have the mastermind here. But also so never worry that we have a cutoff it's only 50.
Right, it doesn't look
Right,
good.
nope, can't happen, because then we're preventing kids from where they should be.
Where's the question? Right.
There's a lot of questions about concerns about if our child struggles and has to go down, and I have the same concern. I also am concerned that if my child takes a more difficult path and has to go down, that'll also affect them in a negative way, that they will feel discouraged about education at all. I have no idea how to advise my child after the last hour we just spent. Pass Math 7 myself. The child's already passing my knowledge. How do I get help to help? Is
That's
the
where we come
teacher?
in.
I mean,
Absolutely.
I don't
That's our
know
job.
how to approach
That's why
advising
we're
my
here.
daughter and what she
Absolutely.
needs to do. Okay.
Absolutely.
My language would be,
Absolutely.
to talk to the classroom teacher and also say, we want you to be in the class where you're going to maximize your learning.
I want her to know
It's-
she can do hard things, and I don't
Exactly.
want her to feel she can't do hard things when
Absolutely.
she doesn't succeed.
Yep, if something's too easy, a student will be bored. If it's too hard, they're going to be
Yeah. I
frustrated.
don't
There's
even
that.
know if her A's that she gets in school now are easy or hard for her.
Right.
So reach out, you can always set up a team conference.
Ask her, how hard did you work to get that? She might not be honest, I don't know.
But you also have the guidance counselor, you have the team, that's the beauty of middle school, you can
Right.
set up a team meeting at any point during the year to check in, to ask those questions. Maybe wait a little bit, and after the after the second quarter, where she would be doing more independent exploration of math, check in, like making a team meeting for sometime in January, and ask those questions of the team, check in with the counselor.
Thank you.
So you said only 13 kids are in calculus BC, but how many are in calculus AB? Like that went from advanced pre-calc in 11th grade to green.
This year we didn't have anyone go from advanced pre-calc into the AP
So there were only
Calc
13
Like
last year.
that's why I say, if you are going to make that switch after advanced algebra 2 trig, that's the time to make it, because once you're in like that junior senior year really should be looked at as a 2-year commitment,
Okay.
not because we're like trying to hold you
So
there,
how
but
many
just
people go
because
from like advanced trig in 10th grade down to pre-calc in 11th? A
so in that
majority?
particular cohort, I believe there was, I want to say it was maybe 26
Okay.
that ended up going down to the 13, but this year, going from that class into the advanced pre-calc calc, there's 21 students. So it's a large, and you'll see that fluctuation.
And
Like
how many
13 is
people-
probably the bottom of where I've seen it, 26 is the top of where I've seen it.
And do a lot of people move in 10th grade, like more so than 8th grade?
Move in.
To the
sorry.
advanced, to pathway 2, that's what
Yes.
we're,
Oh,
you know, like
pathway
if you skip,
2
if
is
you're
a-
like
is
pathway
a-
1 seems
yeah.
impossible, I don't wanna do
But
that, but
pathway
pathway
2
2,
there's
a lot of people do
A
that.
lot of
Yeah.
And you'll hear
Yeah.
that also
A
from
lot.
your teachers in the middle school.
Yeah.
They might be too soon to do the algebra 1A.
Sounds
They are
terrible.
absolutely set to succeed in the.
Like it just
And
sounds
that's
so
like
hard for,
Rate
yeah,
how they
8th
do
grade.
in 9th grade, like grades wise, would then determine could they then get on that path.
But for the most part, we have an idea. You can just
Yeah.
tell the
Yeah,
students
like
who are
maybe the
comfortable,
top,
just,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And you offer statistics, or that's not an AP? You
We have
have
AP
that, yeah.
statistics. We don't culminate in
Yeah.
statistics, again, just based off of where our students are applying to college and what they would be looking for, but we do offer it as an elective.
I also, when we talk about moving down, I hate to use that language, so I'm gonna say moving from the blue pathway to the green pathway. It's not because down seems like a bad thing, but it's not necessarily.
Changing paths.
Yeah, it's shifting paths. To me, it's a good thing that there's flexibility, and our goal was to build in more flexibility at natural places so students could move
That's really the idea.
and do the best when they're ready to do the best that they can, as opposed to the notion when we accelerated too quickly, we felt like it was that moving down, dropping down, and that type of language, which we didn't like. So we're trying to build in some flexibility. So moving from the blue to the green at some point, that's okay. That's not necessarily a negative thing that a student feels like, I maybe hit my ceiling, we're starting to get too hard for me, and I have other things I want to do. If you don't have children in the high school, probably the hardest thing with scheduling is making decisions about what to do, because for a small district, we offer so many options in junior and senior year for students that are really exciting. We have a Global Scholars Program that is 3 years. We have our science research, that's 3 years. We have an entrepreneurship program that's 2 years. And then we have a slew of arts and music electives. There's so many options for kids that we want them to find areas of passion and explore it. So someone might not want to be working at that blue level in math for their junior and senior year because they have some other things they want to do. And there's many AP courses and social studies and English as well. So students may start putting their effort into those courses and want a little bit of an easier time in math. And that's decisions you make as a family.
Got it.
And you're also looking at, we're just looking at math here.
Right.
So when you're putting
all-
the ninth grade acceleration into the perspective of the other classes that they're taking, they may be recommended for that accelerated track, and then, which was in my oldest's case, she was recommended for that track, but then in 10th grade, they also start taking AP classes. They're starting to go into advanced science classes, and when you put that full curriculum into perspective, she started struggling, and we ended up dropping her down to the yellow track in math, because even though she was eligible, in the big picture, it was a struggle.
Don't boo me out of the room, but just a little feedback. There is always going to be the student that does the bare minimum, does it really well. And if given extra credit, if given an extension, they're just not going to do it because they're not told to do it. I would love if in an occasional scenario, I get the distinction and giving them distinction now and recognition, but I'm fine personally, and I may be speaking for other parents, if a teacher says to a child, we're gonna all try the extension today, or you know what, Joe, you're gonna do the extension today.
They do that.
They do.
Do they really?
They do.
I've seen it. I will
But
say
the
I've
problem
seen it.
is if you do it too many times and right, so they do it.
Because in real life, sometimes you're told to do something that you might not want to do.
I get it, yeah.
And it can't always be a choice or an option.
Amen.
And I just feel very strongly
with
that
you.
these kids get all this flexibility and choice, and then they come home and the parent's the bad person saying, well, why didn't you try that?
So, I want you to know that we're of the belief that I think voice and choice is really important, but I also know the middle schoolers, and they're not mature enough sometimes to have a choice.
Totally.
So, we do work
be the
on that
bad
premise,
person once
for
in a
sure.
while. That's
If
all
I had
want.
choice, I would have slept till 10 o'clock today. I'm so tired. So not only are we not going to boo you out of the room, we're going to applaud you.
Tell them to do it. I don't want to be the one to tell them to do the extension.
Yeah, we do have to,
We'll stick
we have
around and answer more questions.
Yes.
certainly.
Thank you for coming today. Mrs. K is going to come in January to talk science, so we'll hopefully see everyone then. We'll have more cookies. And Lisa and Tim, thank you so much.
Great discussion. Thank you.